Here we are, out in the interwebs.
Indeed. Yes. Yeah.
Hello,
There we go.
hello, good morning. Or good
Just give
afternoon,
me
I
a
should
time.
say.
We'll.
Hi, Carissa.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good. How are you guys?
Good, thanks for being here.
Yeah. We're
You, it's
just
good
gonna
to see
give
your voice.
everyone a minute or two, and
Cool.
Here we go.
okay. It is. There we go, and we are on live stream as well. So
Excellent, it's all working. All the bells and whistles are going. Made sure I turned my phone down, so no interruptions there.
Lee, I'm gonna spotlight you.
Okay, thank you for that. Excellent. On stage, got my headphones in, got my hand on the DJ button, everything's ready.
Okay. Um,
Standing by.
okay. What I'm gonna do is, Lee, I'm just gonna spotlight me for a moment, and then what I'll do is I will hand over to you in a minute. Just there we go. We're sort of running a
That's
little
fine.
behind. Generally, people show up a little later. Let me remove the pin there. Okay, I am going to spotlight you and
Excellent. Hello, Asanda. How
add
are
the
you?
spotlight. And there we go. There's both of us.
Excellent.
Okay, I think Lee, let's go on. I'm sure there's going to be more people that join. I just want to quickly start and introduce. Before I introduce you, I just want to remind everyone on this session that this is one of the live webinars that we're holding to introduce the ACRE conference that will be happening next year, 5 to 8 March. And as we were discussing a little bit earlier, we had close on 200 people that came to the conference this year. And we are getting speakers from all over the world, of which Lee is going to be one of them. So if you really like what you hear today, please join us next year. But you're going to have to be a little bit more proactive than that, because we have an early bird pricing only until the 30th of November. So please go and book and make sure that you are on the list. There's also a couple of bonuses if you book early. There's going to be a half-day mini conference, and there's going to be a half-day workshop on NLP and creativity. So I'm not going to introduce Lee. I will say, and he's chosen to introduce himself today. So without much further, I'm going to hand over to Lee.
Excellent. Thank you, Francois, and thank you for inviting me today. Hello, everyone. Hope you are feeling radical today because our subject today is radical creativity. And I think Kubis wanted this topic because he specifically knew that I was a pretty radical dude. So I tend to do everything just a little bit over the top. And for that, it's just my nature. But I enjoy doing that, and I'm going to kind of tell you how I do those things in a few here. But just before that, I want to tell you what to expect today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. Of course, why we want to make sure that you know how to really take creativity, make it radical, and help yourself in your personal or your business world. We are going to do that a little bit interactive today, so I'm going to do a little bit of a demo with some folks here, hopefully. And then hopefully you will leave here with some quick tools that you can go use in your workplace or your personal life, and it leads you to some really great results. Welcome, Wayne. Wayne is here all the way from North Carolina, so thank you for being here, Wayne. And I'm going to tell you just a little bit about myself. My name is Lee Kitchen. I am an innovation catalyst. I worked 32 years at Walt Disney World in Florida, and it was my dream job. I couldn't wait to work there since I was 6 years old, and I loved every second of it. I started in attractions, as you can see with the younger look in the polyester clothing in the photos there. I enjoyed it so much. I helped people onto rides every day, asked them to watch their step about 100,000 times a day, and it didn't matter. I enjoyed it no matter what. My last 25 years at Disney, I worked as a marketing associate, and my last 10 years of that 25-year time in marketing, I was an innovation catalyst, which means I helped people come up with ideas. And by doing that, I learned to be a facilitator and a coach and all kinds of things that I wasn't good at the time, but I ended up learning it. And now with the help of people like Wayne here on the call and Francois, I am a lead innovation catalyst for my own business. It's called Magical Dude Consulting, and I'm loving every minute of it. I've been in business for about 6 years. I help companies of all shapes and sizes and all kinds of categories come up with new ideas. But before we start, I do this thing I call signaling, and it's basically how to bees. And this is kind of how I would love for you to think about our content today and kind of behave with us today. The first one I call be positive and open-minded. There is a connection between positivity and creating ideas and being open to different styles of thinking. That's kind of the first radical thing I'm going to talk to you about, and it's really important, again, while we're together at least, to be positive and open-minded. A lot of bad stuff going on out in the world, but I will always ask this of all my audiences to kind of stay on that positive side. The next one is share the air and have dialogue. So I do want to talk in the chat. I want you to put your questions in the chat. Hopefully, Francois, if you don't mind, you'll help me with the chat moderation. And let's have a little bit of dialogue. If there's something that you have a question about, please make sure you post it. Or if there's a concern or a red flag, you just post it in the chat, and we will have a conversation about it. Being present and all in is really great. I know you probably have 100 tabs open in your browser at the moment. Definitely not judging that. I have about 75 open myself, but I would ask you if you would just minimize those browser windows and kind of stay with us and be all in. Basically, the more in or more all in you are, the more you'll get out of today's session. And then finally, we're going to have a little bit of fun. Being playful definitely leads to more radical ideas. So today, our session is going to be probably a little bit more fun than you used to on a Zoom, but hopefully that'll help you and help you think about the project that you're working on and ideas that you're stewing on. It'll help you out a little bit later. So give me a big thumbs up if you're good with all those rules. Excellent. Thank you. And we will move on. So I am an expert at the design thinking process. And for those of you who are aware of the design thinking process, if you're not aware of it, it's basically a structured way to help people be more creative. And it was originally originated, at least what I learned, and Francois, you'll tell me differently because I know you have another book that says it dates back to 1913, but I learned it from Sid Parnes and Alex Osborne in basically they started it in the 60s. Also, Edward de Bono was a big pioneer of this style of thinking. And now I help companies basically by using this process to, again, think about their challenges differently, from scoping out or making sure that they're solving for the right thing, to making sure that we empathize with our consumer and actually walk in our consumer's shoes, creating really great ways to make sure we come up with a bunch of ideas and make sure everybody gets involved in a collaborative way, and then making sure we spend some time developing and polishing those ideas before we get them out into the world. When Kubis asked me to do this, radical creativity. How do we define radical creativity? Can anyone tell me what their definition is? And you can either, because it's just a few of us, if you want to say on the microphone what you think radical creativity is, or if you want to type it in the chat. What do you think radical creativity is? Anyone want to give it a shot? Francois, you can go too.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's
What
see.
do you
I'll
think it
kick
is?
off. I'll see. I think, if we start looking at creativity is something that's new and novel. But I think when we start talking about radical creativity, we are totally reinventing the way we think about ideas and the way that we bring it. So it's about taking very extreme perspectives. It's about really pushing our thoughts to the boundaries of what we are capable of.
Absolutely. Yes. That's exactly how I thought about it too. And, I was prepared for any answer today because when I ask people this question, to me, it's a little bit subjective, right? So it's creativity is a really personal thing. And I say all the answers are essentially right. I wrote something, but it's not the end all be all. It's just something that kind of guides me when it comes to thinking about this. And that is, I think about radical creativity as the habit of continually doing things in new ways and radical ways to make a positive difference in our personal and business lives. So, again, that's my definition of it, but yours could be a little bit different. And Francois, I love the way you articulated that. I think the most important thing here is making that creativity a habit. So a lot of people think that creativity is this epiphany, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I just have an idea. There's a big light bulb over my head and I have an idea. Well, that is part of creativity, definitely. A lot of people also equate creativity with titles. So if you're a creative marketing manager, if you're a creative director, or you're an art director, everybody would assume that person's creative. But they don't put creative in front of finance manager, but they should. My finance manager when I worked at Disney was the best at making sure I spent all that budgeted money in August before we went to the new fiscal year in October. So we're kind of held back sometimes by kind of societal pressures on what creativity is. But I say the most important part is making it a habit, right? It's not just bringing creativity off the shelf and using it for a second in a brainstorm and then putting it back on the shelf. It's actually how can we think differently every single day, and what kind of things are we going to make sure that we do and go out of our way to do to make sure that we get these new and radical ideas, right? Francois, give me an idea. What do you think about the definition I put up there?
Perfect. The habit
Awesome.
of continuing doing things in new and radical ways.
Awesome.
Sounds
Thank
like
you.
my life.
All right, so Francois tells me that the tacos aren't really exciting in South Africa, but I'm going to just preview a couple things I'm going to talk about it. So I'm going to say, let's talk about it. We're going to talk about radical creativity here. Sorry, that was kind of a taco pun, but I'm a big taco lover here in the States, and I'll show you an example of that a little bit later. So, how do I get to radical creativity? So this is kind of the substance I'll be talking about today. The first one is radical being. So this is asking for and kind of modeling the behaviors needed to get to something radical. So every time I do a session when I'm leading people to great ideas, the first thing I always do is those how to be's that I did earlier today. Let's behave in a positive way. Let's make sure we build on each other's ideas. Let's make sure we use positive language, and let's have a little bit of fun, right? So, but also I try to emulate those and model those behaviors wherever I go. So even in my personal life, when my wife comes up with an idea that I think is pretty radical and maybe not that great, I will still try to keep a straight face and go, oh yeah, and try to build on and stay positive and things like that. So the being part of creativity is really important, and that's especially when you're working in a collaborative environment. It's really important that we all kind of behave this way, because we can get to some much better things when we're behaving and modeling those behaviors of creativity. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in a second. The next one I call radical thinking. So this helps people get into the right mindset to get radical. And I'm going to do a little exercise to kind of bring that to light today. I'm going to ask for a volunteer. I hope I have a couple of volunteers there. I'm going to ask for a volunteer to help me there. And then the next will be radical doing. So this is when I use these things called lateral thinking tools, which is making sure that I pull people out of their comfort zone and pull people out of their normal way of thinking in order for them to get to that next step. And I'm going to show you 4 different tools that I use. And then the other thing that I've stacked in this presentation is I'm actually going to show you the tool that I used, the example of the tool that I used, and then what the execution of the idea was that came from that tool. So I have a couple of great Disney examples, and then I have another example from a fast food chain here in the States called Taco Bell that I'll showcase to you, that are just great examples of how that lateral thinking led to some really radical ideas and execution. And then finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about radical collaboration. Collaboration is one of the most important things in innovation and design thinking, and it takes more than one, basically, to create ideas and to build on ideas. And you might be the most genius ideator in the world, but if you're ideating by yourself, you might be missing out, because if you bounce ideas off your colleagues or your friends or your spouse or whoever it is, you can build those ideas to be something bigger and something that you never thought you could make. So I'm going to really be a proponent of collaboration. I have a couple of success stories that I'll talk about today, one from the Disney area and then one from something I did personally. So that's how I get to radical creativity. So I'm just going to jump right in and talk a little bit about radical being. And Francois, I was going to do a demo, but do you think it's still okay to do a demo with the number of folks I hear, or should I go on?
I think maybe go on.
Okay, excellent. No problem. So one of the things I like to do to start off a session is a thing called an energizer. And what I do is I make sure that everybody's kind of in that right mindset to be able to kind of think differently and to kind of be that and kind of see that. So in a radical being situation, I signal desired behavior up front. Like I said, I want to make sure that people know how I want them to behave. I model the desired behavior. You heard me talk about that earlier. Another thing I do is I gently police behaviors during sessions. And I have this word here called Elmo. Now, Elmo, you may know, is a cute little red character from Sesame Street. Do we have Sesame Street in South Africa? I'm not quite sure, Francois.
Some, but it's not as well as it would be in the US.
Yeah, no worries. Elmo is just a cute little Muppet character, and I bring him to meetings because Elmo actually is an acronym for Enough, Let's Move On. So many times people get into analysis paralysis, and so it was a cute way that I police that meeting by saying, hey, if somebody gets into that area where they just keep killing ideas, let's go ahead and take Elmo and have somebody use Elmo and just show it to them and go, hey, we need to kind of move on. And it works really great. I've had a lot of companies actually adopt it and actually buy everybody little Elmo dolls so they can pass it around because they live in the analysis paralysis world. And then another thing that I would say is, as you're creating and collaborating with somebody, watch your body language. So I always say that when you have a really great idea and you go to tell somebody a great idea, a lot of times what happens is that person unknowingly will actually give you a look. I call it the look. So you go and you tell your great idea to someone and they look back at you going, it's kind of like the shut eye or the like, oh, like they cringe a little bit, right? So I ask that when we're creating ideas together, you watch your body language, because we automatically, as humans, we want to judge things, right? Well, we judge things right out of the gate before we've heard them because they all sound really strange. So as we're creating ideas, as we're working together, try to have that more open sense and try not to make that face, basically, because that face is kind of detrimental, because it could lead to someone kind of self-censoring themselves and not getting out the idea that they need to. So having that kind of free form of ideas going back and forth and making sure that I'm not afraid to give you my idea because I might get the look. So Francois, you've probably had somebody give you that look before, right?
Absolutely.
Because you're a great ideator, I know, and you probably have said it. I get it all the time, but I'm used to it, so I kind of pass through it. It doesn't scare me anymore. And then the other thing is that think about the terms that you're using and the language that you use when you're creating ideas. I say stick to the positive side of the language. So instead of no but or no because, I say let's build ideas by saying yes and. It's a great tool that I learned from improv theater. And it's basically, I'm going to make you an offer, you're going to take that offer and make me an offer back, and we're both going to yes and each other to build the idea to be as big as it can be. Another phrase I like to use is what if? What if this happened? What if that happened? Just imagining a world that doesn't exist is a pretty cool way to kind of see the future, right? That's how, if you think about it, that's how people like Steve Jobs and Reed Hastings and the people who started Uber and stuff like that, that's kind of how they thought. They were like, well, what if the world that we live in is not the world that we're going to live in 20 years from now? What if it's this, right? So thinking and using that phrase, what if, will really inspire you to some big thinking. And again, how about we do this? How about we do that? So think about kind of those three phrases as you're building on ideas with everyone. It really does pay off. Okay, the radical thinking part is what I was kind of leading into before. And this is, again, I usually, to get people to the right place before I start a session, I do this thing called an energizer. This particular one I'm not going to do today, but it's a really great thing where I ask one person to come up with a crisis that they're facing and another person to come up with a random object. And what I do is I have them brainstorm those things and use that object to solve that crisis. And just by doing that, they get into a mindset that anything is possible, right? So if your crisis was, oh, I'm out of my favorite cookies at home, and so is my local grocery store, and the object was a baseball, what could you do to use a baseball to solve that object? Oh, well, maybe it's a collector baseball, and I can sell it for a price and custom order the cookies myself. Maybe it's a baseball that I can take to a local school that's selling those cookies instead, and I can trade that baseball for some cookies, right? So I have people kind of do that to get into the right mindset and again kind of get to that radical thinking, because there's so many things that you could do to solve that crisis with that object, and I have them do it a bunch of different ways, and it really does help them kind of get to that radical thinking. So the next thing I call radical doing, right? This is, we're going to take a different tool and a different way of thinking, and we're going to use that tool to get to some really radical things. And what I've done today is I've curated some examples for you of how this has worked in the past before for me. And I'll give you a little bit of an explanation on the tool that I use, and then I'll talk about the results that it had. So the first tool I use, I call Borrow It. And Borrow It sounds like it's stealing other people's ideas, but what it really is let's go out into the world and see who else may have solved our challenge. So really all you have to do is kind of simplify what you're trying to solve for, and let's find out who's done that, and let's use that example to kind of as a jumping off point to say, what was the principle behind what they did, and let's take that principle and apply it back to us. So at Disney, when I worked at Disney, we had a marketing campaign that we were creating something for, and I remember I used this Borrow It tool, and again, basically Borrow It works like this. I hand people a piece of stimulus, and this particular piece of stimulus was a video that they had to watch, and it was a video about Lynx deodorant. So if you don't know what Lynx deodorant is, Lynx is a deodorant and kind of hygienic products that are marketed towards teenage boys. And this example basically was a live installation in Victoria Station, and it was back in the early days of augmented reality, so it was still really fascinating to everybody. And basically you could stand in this specific spot in Victoria Station in the UK, and these angels would land on the ground, and you could get your picture with the angels, and basically it correlated with the Lynx marketing campaign. So when you dig to the principle behind that, basically what it is surprising and delighting your audience in a different way and an unexpected way. So how does that apply to Disney parks? How does Lynx deodorant, which is marketed towards teenagers, apply to a family park? Well, if you think about it, the principle behind that is surprising and delighting people in a different way. So I'm going to first show you the Lynx video, and then I'll show you how we were inspired at Disney and what we did and what we did with that inspiration. So here's the first video.
Platform 12 for the 0902 Southern service. genuinely amazing. An angel came out of nowhere on the screen and you could just like interact with it. Brilliant, really cool.
To her, and then she disappeared.
Lee, I don't know if you can hear me, but we've lost your sound.
Oh, sorry about that. So just a simple execution, right? It was just let's take our marketing campaign, bring it to life in a different way in Victoria Station. Well, when I showed that to some people at Disney, they were really inspired, and again, they love the principle behind the whole surprising and delighting people. Because if you saw the looks on those people's faces, they were really surprised. And again, it was right when AR kind of started, so it was still kind of a novelty back in 2011. But Disney took it to another level, and they basically took that principle and said, hey, how can we surprise and delight our potential customers in a totally different way? And then they created this execution that took place in Times Square in New York. Anyway, just a really great example of how the radicalness of using a deodorant. We used deodorant, and that deodorant inspired that great campaign that we did in Times Square. So moving on here, the next tool that I use quite a lot is what I call force connections. And that's when you take a totally random object and you inspire people to take this random object, to dissect it. So let's take this object and let's figure out, what does this object do for the world, right? I'm going to have you make a big list of all the things that this object does, but then we're going to put the object away and we're going to review that list and just use and force connect the things on that list to whatever challenge it is we're solving. So this is another great example where I had a brainstorm at Disney. It was with a bunch of people from our resorts division, and we were trying to figure out how to make the challenge was, how do we make the resorts experience so much differentiated from any resort in the Central Florida area? And for this tool, or for this session, I used this toy. It was basically a kid's toy. It was probably one of my kids' toys. I don't even know how I got it, right? So I used this little van, right? And people took the van and they made the list like I told them. They dissected the list. And the funniest part about it is that the idea that came out of this was, this inspired them to think about transportation and to think about cabs and to think about Uber and Lyft. And before you knew it, they came up with an idea for a custom Uber and Lyft that was just at Disney. So if you didn't want to take the Disney buses or the Disney monorails, you could actually take this special, you could open up your phone just like you do with your normal Lyft app, and you could order a Lyft that came to your door. Now they called it Bounce because they were going to model it after Judy Hopps from another one of the movies. But as soon as somebody drew a picture, it didn't work. So they drew another picture of a van with a bunch of spots on it, And they basically called it and invented a service that we call minivan. So from that little toy van came this radical idea of let's create our own lift service on Disney property. And it was pretty spectacular. It's really popular. It's a huge revenue driver because a lot of people want to avoid lines and waiting for the monorail and things like that. So I'm just going to give you a quick preview of what minivan looks like. So guests that ride in the minivan, they get to get some really great knowledge from knowledgeable cast members, and they get to, again, go from one destination to the other relatively quickly for the low price of like $20 to $40, whatever they're extra on what they're paying. So again, that idea came from a little tiny toy van. That's how radical that was. How would you even think that a major idea that's changed the business, basically gave us a huge differentiator, came from that little toy? All right, Francois, we still good? Still with me? Everybody can hear me and everything? Excellent. All right, so here's another tool that I use to get to that radical stuff. It's called Re-Express It. Re-Express It is really great because it allows people to do a little bit of role playing, and it's really fun to watch in a brainstorm, watch people role play because they get really playful, they get really silly, and it's really, really great. So what I do is I have people in small groups. One of them plays a role, and the other people kind of play the media. So they interview this person, they take a lot of notes, and then I have them stop playing the role, and I have them take their notes and basically use those notes to make sure that it inspires an idea forward the challenge that we're working on. So this next one was really interesting. We had a marketing campaign coming up that was called it was called My Disney Side. So it was about getting people to come to Disney because they express their regular selves at the office and in their personal lives, but when they get them to Disney, they have their Disney self. So you have these normal, mild-mannered people who go to the office, and as soon as they go to Disney, they become kids, and they wear the big goofy hats, and they run to the next attraction, and we found that people behave differently when they get to Disney. So we did a whole marketing campaign called My Disney Side, and it was really great. But at this session, I had one of the teams play Peter Pan. So I thought it'd be kind of fun, right? Peter Pan's a little bit of a different kid-like character, and I thought getting in the kid-like mind would be all right. But they focused a lot, not just on Peter Pan, but they focused, if you've seen the movie Peter Pan's shadow has its personality of its own, and constantly follows him and does things differently. So they did basically they interviewed both Peter Pan and his shadow, and that resulted in a marketing tactic that they made that was a live installation inside a mall that was called Disney Shadows. It was probably one of the most popular marketing tactics that we did. It, again, surprised and delight a bunch of people in a bunch of different places, but it was really a kind of a different take, and it really encapsulated the Disney side concept really well. It also is one of their most viewed videos. So this is Disney Shadows.
Hold on. I think I'm getting shadowed by a Goofy.
Again, a really great thing that came from Peter Pan. That's how radical that was. It was a conversation about Peter Pan and his shadow, and it led to one of the greatest marketing tactics that they ever did. Again, that is radical to me, right? It came from one small thing. So the last one I'll talk about is a tool that I call breaking the rules, and this is a classic because it gets people outside of their head, right? It gets people to think about what are the rules that we have to live by, and let's think about a case where those rules don't exist, or those rules are changed, or they're different. And I did this with a restaurant client, a QSR restaurant, or a quick service restaurant called Taco Bell here in the States. Taco Bell is one of the most popular quick service restaurants. They've been around since, I believe, the late 50s, and they are really they consider themselves a lifestyle brand because Taco Bell is like this cool, edgy brand. And one of the challenges that they had, one of the rules that they had to live by, was they couldn't use the term Taco Tuesday to market, because Taco Tuesday, by the way, is a really big thing in the States, right? So every Tuesday people talk about it, they tweet about it, and it's time to have tacos. It's taco night basically on Tuesdays, right? So they couldn't market Taco Tuesdays because another company owned Taco Tuesdays. So the premise was that was the rule. They couldn't use Taco Tuesday. So what happens if we freed Taco Tuesday? So they came up with this big idea to actually go to courts and actually ask the owners of the IP owners of the phrase Taco Tuesday, and ask them to release their phrase, not for them, not for Taco Bell, but for everybody, right? So anybody who's in the taco business can use the term Taco Tuesdays, because until then, somebody owned it, so you couldn't actually use it in marketing. I mean, you have people on social media do it anyway, but as far as companies, they couldn't actually do it. Basically, having that no Taco Tuesday was a big rule for them, but they overcame it, right? They came up with this idea of freeing Taco Tuesday. I'm going to kind of show you the results of that with their one of their spokespeople is basketball player LeBron James. So this is freeing Taco Tuesdays.
Want to know what's absurd? Taco Tuesday is trademarked. Fortunately, someone's going to do something about it.
You know what it is! It's Taco!
Why did I get bleeped? Because this is a commercial and there's a trademark on Taco. I mean, how could someone own Taco?
Come on, man.
Everyone should be able to say and celebrate Taco. Taco.
What are we doing?
Thankfully, someone is doing something about it. No more trademark, no more bleeping, starting right now.
Taco Tuesday!
So they actually took that idea and they did it. They actually went to court and they asked the owner of the company to actually release Taco Tuesday, and they did it, right? Then they did it was a whole big media thing, and now actually Taco Tuesday, the phrase, is actually usable by anybody in the United States to use for marketing. But again, that came from breaking the rules. That came from somebody listing that rule and doing the radical thing of let's imagine a world that doesn't exist without that exists without that rule, which was super, super cool. All right, wrapping it up. We're getting close to wrapping it up here. So this one I call radical collaboration or collaborating, and I find it to be one of the most important things about getting radical and getting crazy and getting to those big ideas. So I mentioned earlier how important it is to basically bounce ideas off somebody else, to use a group of people to create ideas. You might be a great ideator, and you might think, that you come up with really big ideas, but your ideas are only going to get bigger if you collaborate with someone else. So an example that I want to use about this, well, first I'll tell you a little bit about it. So radical collaboration to me is creating ways and structures to make sure everyone gets involved. So if you're at a business, specifically, you probably only work with your teams, your individual teams on certain challenges, but thinking about how can you get other people in the office involved? How can you get people that aren't necessarily close to your challenge involved to help you come up with ideas? And that goes to my second things. I always recommend to clients who are having brainstorm sessions, don't just invite the experts to a session, right? If you're going to have a brainstorm session and you're going to create ideas, it's important that you invite some unbiased folks there too, because the unbiased folks are going to throw in different things because they're not as close to your challenge as you are, and they're the ones that are going to kind of spice it up. So think about those people within your organization, not necessarily on your immediate department or your immediate team, but just outside your team that you could say, hey, you got a couple of extra hours, please come into our session and kind of help us ideate against this one challenge. You'll find that the ideas you come up with will be that much better. Another thing that I always suggest, and that is getting input from all levels, right? This comes from this. I was inspired by this specifically with Walt Disney. Walt used to say that he wanted ideas from across the organization, whether or not it was the lead Imagineer or whether or not it was the janitor. It's really important because in your organization, everybody has a different viewpoint, and a lot of people from different walks of life, and that diversity of thought is what leads you to the next big thing. So making sure you get that input from your front line, making sure you get the input from your managers and from your executives. When I have sessions, I mix all of them together, and I make sure that everybody kind of feels on equal footing when we're creating ideas. So I can't stress enough, especially your front line. The frontline folks are the ones that are living it every single day. Having them come into an idea session, they're the ones that are closest to your consumers. They're the ones that are really living it day to day. Bring them in, and you'll find that the ideas that they create along with you are going to be really great. Here's another one that I say, encouraging unplanned collaborations and non-linear partnerships. So I'll give you just a context of how I used that when I worked at Disney. We actually created a space at Disney we called our innovation lab. We called it ACRE28. And within ACRE28, it was a really big room that had comfy chairs in it, and we made all of the walls dry erase so you could write on all the walls, and we put a Starbucks coffee in there to be kind of a magnet to get people there. And what we saw was a lot of people would get their coffee and go sit down with a colleague that they only saw in the elevator, and they would talk about projects that they were working on simultaneously, but they didn't know each other were working on the project. And they would bounce ideas off each other from their different perspectives. And we found that all of the ideas and the things that came out of that were really, really good, right? So it was that unplanned collaboration that really, really helped the organization. And then nonlinear partnerships. So at Disney, I was lucky at Disney because we had a lot of different departments with a lot of different talents. I was lucky enough to have people that were engineers from our Imagineering group, that were designers, that were merchandise artists that designed a lot of our merchandise, that were landscapers, there's so many different kinds of people. And what I did is I would invite them to sessions, but I'd also invite to meet them once a month and say, hey, what are you working on? How can we help each other? And I say non-linear because they weren't in marketing, and we probably had really nothing in common beyond the fact that we worked at Disney, but just kind of hearing what each other were working on and kind of adding to each other's mix really helped out. And I had 2 or 3 of these lunches basically every month, and that we encouraged everybody to kind of do the same. And we found that it created a little bit more of a team atmosphere, and again, the cross-pollination between departments and things that were going on was so much better. And so think about in your business, who is it that works in a different department that maybe you can connect with? Maybe you can just have a quick conversation about what you're working on and how you both can add and collaborate to that. And then another thing I would like to stress is a lot of people go into collaboration to succeed, right? And if they don't succeed and they fail, they may not try collaborating ever again. So I'm of the mindset that it really isn't about success or failure. It's really about the experience that you get with the collaboration. And I'm going to showcase to you a big example of that. And that is Walt Disney and Salvador Dali. So if you know who Walt Disney was, of course, he was an American media mogul. He made the first a full-length feature animation with Snow White. He made a bunch of them in the 40s and 50s, and then he opened the first theme park, Disneyland, in 1955. He was just a really great innovator. And then Salvador Dali, who, if you've ever heard of Salvador Dali, he was an impressionist, or he was first an impressionist, but then became a surrealist, and he was known for his eccentricity and surrealism, and just was a bizarre person in general, very eccentric, bizarre person. And so you wouldn't think that these two would have any common ground and be able to get together. Well, they kind of had they had an inkling for each other. I call it a bromance. They both liked what each other were doing in their respective worlds. And at one point, Walt asked Salvador Dali to sign an art book that he sent him, and then Salvador Dali was just amazed that Walt even knew he existed, right? So they got together and decided to collaborate on a project. And they asked John Hench, who was a famous Disney engineer who did a lot of the original sketches for Disneyland. They asked him to work with Salvador Dali and draw out some storyboards. So here's just a couple of the weird storyboards that they wrote out. And what happened was in the 40s, when the war was over, when World War II was over, Walt got a lot of pressure from his bank saying, hey, you need to make another feature film because the studio's not going to survive unless you do. So they had to scrap the project that both he and Salvador Dali were working on. It was for an animated short. It was to be called Destino, and it was using a really beautiful song that was originally written for a movie called Saludos Amigos. But what happened is they scrapped it, but they still became friends, and they stayed friends until their dying days. Basically, their families were close. They went out anytime they were in Hollywood or New York. They went out together. They had a really rich experience and a rich friendship. And it wasn't until the 90s that they actually discovered that they had worked on this project. And so in the 90s, Roy Disney, looking for content for Fantasia 2000, dug up these sketches and actually brought the dream come true and called it Disney's Destino. It's a weird thing. Look it up on the internet. It's a bizarre piece of Disney history that people have rarely seen. But the thing that I'd like to stress here is that there was no success in that collaboration, right? That thing was canceled, but they did find that experience really enriched themselves and their lives. And that thing wasn't achieved until 50 years later when they were both gone. And it's just amazing what can happen when you collaborate. So I had a recent experience of this. I went to ACRE in 2018, right? I was going to ACRE, and I knew these two legendary people would be there. A gentleman by the name of Wayne Childers, who's been in the same line of work that I have for the last 25 years, amazing, successful person. And I'd heard of this other guy, this other dude named Mark Dodsworth, who was this legendary percussionist and drummer, did all these really great things. Well, when I show up, I'm eager to meet both these guys. And we show up, we have some Simba chips and some local beers, and it was a lot of fun. But they basically peer pressure me to help them with a session that they were doing at ACRE, and it was against my better judgment because I was already stressing out about my own sessions that I was doing. But I said yes to the offer, not knowing where it would go. And the greatest part about it is that was a really successful session. Francois afterwards were telling me all the great accolades we received, and the three of us really started a core friendship there. But it was pretty radical for us to do that. Again, Mark and Wayne kind of only barely knew each other. Mark had originally been tasked to do a session. It was called Collaborative Innovation or something like that. So he roped in Wayne, and then I was walking along to try to have a beer. They roped me in too. And we've been presenting ever since. Every year we go to ACRE, we always present there. The three of us, we call ourselves the wise dudes, not because we're wise, but because we ask all the wise. And it's become a lifelong friendship. And we had no idea if it was going to be a success or failure. It didn't matter. But last year we put together this really great workshop that we called Get Into Your Phygital Selves. So it was all about mixing physical and mixing digital. And to bring it to life, we actually hired an AI expert and a musician to create a video for us that showcased how phygital and digital works together. And so I'm gonna treat you to that production right now. This is Get Phygital by the Three Wise Dudes.
Now let's get some digital focus. Pump up your vision with serious boldness. Foot in tomorrow, a foot in today. Let's reverse imaginarily, take it away.
It's gold you see when you do this right. Start in the future and make your vision bright. Then work it backwards with surprise and delight. Do the so what, now what, and use that insight.
Let's get digital.
I wanna go digital. Let's get into digital.
Digital. Get digital.
Make it into digital. Get digital.
Digital.
I wanna go digital. Let's get into digital.
Digital. get digital.
Make it into digital. Get digital.
Here's what we say about getting digital. Ain't always easy, not always digital. Gotta talk, gotta think, listen together. It takes real effort to make the world better. Hey, Mark, that brings up a point. Once you start digital, what's stopping this joint?
Your vision will flourish with surprise and delight, stretching our future to wicked new heights. Get digital, digital.
I wanna go digital.
All right. So without having that radical collaboration, we could have never got to that weirdness, that AI weirdness, which we showcased at ACRE last year. And I will use every excuse to showcase it again because I just love how it came out. All right, so we're just going to review really quick here, and let's just talk about what we did talk about. Remember, radical being is about asking for and modeling behaviors needed to get something radical. Radical thinking is helping people get into the right mindset to get radical. Radical doing, I called using those lateral tools, lateral thinking to create and execute ideas. And then radical collaborating is going outside your comfort zone to partner and to co-create. So, Francois, I ended a little bit early here, but I wanted to make sure I had enough time for questions. Who's got questions? I think we only have 2 people left, but go for it.
We'll see in a moment if Charlie's got a question. But while you were talking about radical creativity and sort of jumping into this radical ideas, let me just add a spotlight on me as well. So there we go. You'll remember, if we go back in scientific discovery, Einstein, he, for example, he just let go of time and space, and he imagined himself riding on a photon.
Yeah.
And then he imagined what the world would be like as he approached the speed of light. And when people think about scientists and the way that they invent, they're probably thinking about lots of formulas and mathematics and going through the hard work, and they never ever think of a radical technique like visualization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It works too. It really works. Just putting yourself in that space really works. I find I struggle with it in the workplace a lot of times, but as long as I usually do that exercise like 3 in. So I loosen people up with other exercises first before I go for that. But once I get to that, they love it. They really respond.
Yeah.
Who's got questions out there?
Yeah. Well, if we look at more recent times, I mean, the way that Tesla has reimagined the automotive industry.
Yeah.
So that's also a really interesting way of thinking, because if you look at the automotive industry for probably a couple of decades before Tesla emerged, they mostly focused on bigger, better, stronger, faster, more luxuries. Yep. And then Tesla actually went and they said, let's reimagine the whole experience. What is the driving experience like? What should it be like?
Have you driven one of those, Francois? Have you driven a Tesla?
We don't have Tesla in South Africa yet.
Oh, it's so fast! You're gonna love it whenever you drive one. I love driving them. They're like little Spitfires. They're so fast.
Yeah. And one last contribution I want to make before we ask question is, as you probably know, certainly people that's been attending the webinars know that I've got an absolute fascination for artificial intelligence and ChatGPT. And while you were talking about that technique, I sort of asked the question to ChatGPT, and I said, acting as a drop of water. So I created a perspective, acting as a drop of water. What would be ways to look at the problem of widespread unemployment? And ChatGPT actually came up with some really interesting answers, and I'm just going to give you one or two of those. Yeah, it says adaptability and resilience. It says emulate the properties of water by encouraging adaptability and resilience in the workforce. Just as water flows to fill gaps and take on the shape of its container, individuals can adapt their skills to match emerging job opportunities. So if you're thinking about radical creativity, you're sitting with this tool that's freely available that can actually aid you in everything that you've been talking about today.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't wait to see your the AI summary that the Zoom AI client does. I would love for you to send me that because it does a really great job capturing the meeting.
Let's see. I'm not seeing any questions on the YouTube channel. Charlie, are you up for a question?
I just like to ask if it will be possible to have the slides that you showed during the webinar. It's possible. I don't know how.
I think he's going to have a replay of it, so you can definitely see it there. Yeah. Right, Francois? You keep that on the site, yeah.
Charlie,
and also we're gonna have a recap from the AI client here.
Yeah. Charlie, if you just drop me an email, you've got my email address. Just drop me an email, and I will make sure that you get a link to the replay, and then you can go and have a look at that as well.
Yeah, and Charlie, I have the lateral tools in a document that I can send to Francois, and he can get those to you also.
Okay, thanks so much.
That was most of the stuff that I presented.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Lee, we are sort of at the end of our time. So I'm going to say from my side, I don't know, is there a last observation you want to share before I wrap
No,
it up?
I was just gonna put up my put up my QR code for anybody that's watching the video. I would love for you to connect. This is my LinkedIn page. If anything you saw here intrigued you, you want to ask more questions, please make sure you get in touch with me. Send me a message on LinkedIn. I'm a pay it forward kind of guy, so I'm happy to help you work it out if you're planning on using this in your workplace. But no, that's it. I really enjoyed being here, Francois. Thank you so much for inviting me. I hope everyone was inspired, and I can't wait to come to ACRE28 next year. Woo!
Yeah, I want to reiterate that if you want to get to meet Lee or just hang around with him and have a drink or two with him next year at ACRE conference, make sure to make use of that early bird offer. Lee is a very interesting guy, and I can vouch that he's a friendly and gregarious guy as well. So yeah, please do come to ACRE. Lee, from our side, thank you very much. It was a fascinating presentation. I really enjoyed what you were talking about. It's given me a couple of new perspectives. So thank you very much. We really appreciate you, and we appreciate everything that you do for ACRE.
Thank you.